All right, everybody, buckle up because today's deep dive takes us straight to Spain. And let me tell you, it's a wild ride. We're going to be jumping between stories that you might not think go together, but stick with us. There's a method to the madness. We're talking about people having a tough time making ends meet political drama that's straight out of a spy movie. And get this, technology's caught up in it all, too.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it, how these stories really highlight the things that are putting pressure on Spanish society right now. The economy, the political scene, technology, they're all mixed up together, and we're going to untangle them piece by piece.
Right. It just seems crazy to me. Almost 3 million people in Spain who have jobs but are still living below the poverty line. That's like 13.7% of working people. I mean, I get that raising the minimum wage and getting unemployment down doesn't magically fix everything,
hmm
but you'd think it'd make more of a dent than that.
It all comes down to the types of jobs that are out there. It's about the quality, not just how many jobs there are. And that Oxfam Intermon report really drives that point home. When you see that some jobs are way more likely to keep people stuck in poverty, it starts to paint a much clearer picture.
Yeah, they're talking about how tough it is for people in agriculture and domestic work. Can you imagine? 3 out of every 10 people in those jobs are living in poverty. That's just,
It is. It
yes.
is. And it makes you wonder what kind of jobs are actually being created as the economy changes. Are they paying enough? Are the contracts reliable? Are there any benefits? Because right now, those sectors are really lacking.
And here's the kicker. This is what really gets to me. More than half of these families who are struggling, they had to skip important health care. And I don't just mean like skipping a trip to the dentist. They couldn't even afford mental health support when they needed it. It makes you realize how much poverty really impacts people's lives in ways you don't always hear about.
It's so true. It goes way beyond just not having enough money. It's about being shut out of having your basic needs met and having opportunities to make things better. It traps people in a cycle that's incredibly hard to break free from.
So you've got this pressure cooker of economic problems, and then bam, let's throw some political drama into the mix. Case Coldo. Remember that name? Because it's shaking things up in Spanish politics.
Case Coldo is like a textbook example of how accusations of corruption can throw a whole country into chaos. Here you have a former government minister right in the thick of it, and today's parliament session was completely dominated by this case.
The article mentioned that the opposition tried to get a full-on debate going about corruption, but the government totally shut it down. What's the strategy there? Why wouldn't they want to talk about it?
Well, it's not really our place to guess at their motivations, but it's pretty obvious that they're trying to control what people are saying and hearing. This whole thing could really hurt people's trust in the government, and they're trying to limit the damage.
And this is all happening while there are all these other political hot topics bubbling under the surface. ETA prisoners, the protests about housing. This feeling that people are restless. It feels like one little thing could set everything off.
There's definitely a sense of unease everywhere you look. The economy's a mess, there are political scandals, people are divided. It's a recipe for disaster.
And if things couldn't get any crazier, let's throw some high-tech spying into the mix. Pegasus. Remember that spyware that's been all over the news? Turns out it's wormed its way into Spanish politics, too. This is some serious stuff.
It really shows you how technology can be used in ways that feel like a complete invasion of privacy. It raises all sorts of red flags about people's right to privacy and the government having too much power. These are things people in Spain are debating right now.
So get this. A lawyer who represents a Catalan separatist is saying his phone was hacked. And guess who he thinks did it? The CNI, Spain's own intelligence agency.
And here's the part that's even more complicated. The government says, nope, we didn't use Pegasus to hack that guy. But then they turn around and admit they used it in another case involving Catalan politicians.
Hold on. So which is it? They deny it, and then they admit to it in the same breath. What are we supposed to believe?
It's a very calculated move. They're walking a tightrope here. They're acknowledging that, yeah, they use powerful surveillance tools, but they're also trying to reassure people that they're not just using them willy-nilly, that it's all legal and above board.
But the lawyer's not buying it. He thinks this is just the beginning, and he wants answers. It's like something out of a spy thriller. Speaking of which, let's take a quick break to gather our thoughts, and then we'll figure out how all these threads connect. We're back and diving even deeper into what's happening in Spain today.
Trying to connect those dots between these seemingly isolated events to uncover those deeper systemic issues.
Totally. It's kind of like we've wandered onto the set of some intense political thriller, but this is the real deal. This is people's lives we're talking about.
It's definitely a tangled web we're looking at. Think about it. We've got people struggling to make ends meet, this huge political scandal brewing, and then the whole spyware thing raising all sorts of questions about privacy and the government having too much power.
And let's not forget about those families who can't even afford basic health care. That really hit home for me. It makes these economic problems feel so much more real and so much more urgent.
Absolutely. It just highlights how far-reaching the effects of economic hardship can be. We can't lose sight of the human impact. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's real people making impossible choices every single day just to get by.
And then you layer on top of that the political gamesmanship surrounding Case Coldo and the possibility that they're misusing Pegasus. It makes you wonder, who can you trust these days?
I think that's the underlying question here, isn't it? There's this growing sense that you can't trust the people in charge, that you can't trust the institutions. And when you combine that with the economic anxiety and these concerns about surveillance, it creates a very volatile situation.
Yeah. It's like we're putting together a puzzle. We started with these separate stories, but now we can see that they all fit into this bigger picture of unease and distrust.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that while we're focusing on Spain, these are global issues. This struggle to find the right balance between security and individual freedom in the digital age, that's something every democracy is grappling with right now.
It's kind of scary when you think about it. These tools that are supposed to make us safer, what if they get turned against us? The whole Pegasus thing is a perfect example of that. Are we willing to sacrifice our privacy in the name of security?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. But I think one thing's for sure. Transparency and accountability are more important now than ever, especially when it comes to something as powerful as spyware.
Yeah, we need to know that these tools are being used responsibly,
Yeah.
that they're not being used to target people for their political beliefs or to silence dissent. Otherwise, we're headed down a very dangerous path.
You're absolutely right. The potential for abuse is definitely there. And that's why we need a free press that's willing to dig deep and ask the tough questions. That's how we hold the powerful accountable.
It's like those investigative journalists who wrote the articles we're talking about today. They play such a vital role. Without them, who knows what we wouldn't know about all of this?
Couldn't agree more. They're like watchdogs, keeping an eye on everything, making sure these issues don't get swept under the rug.
Because let's be real for a second. Sometimes it feels like the people in charge would rather we didn't know about any of this.
Transparency can be messy and inconvenient, there's no doubt about that, but it's the foundation of a healthy democracy. We need a free press that's not afraid to speak truth to power.
Absolutely. So before we move on to the big so what of all this, are there any other connections you're seeing between these stories? Anything that really stands out to you? It's like we've been putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle, and now we can finally see the whole picture. We've got people struggling to make ends meet. We've got political scandals brewing, and this whole thing with surveillance. They're all connected.
And it feels like things are really teetering on the edge, don't they? It makes you wonder, what does all of this mean for the future of democracy in Spain?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What happens next?
And it's a question we should all be asking ourselves, not just in Spain, but all over the world. Technology is changing so fast. It has the power to do amazing things, but it also comes with a lot of risks. Will it help make our democracy stronger and give more power to the people? Or will it just make the gap between the haves and have-nots even bigger and erode the trust and accountability that we need for democracy to work?
It's like technology is a double-edged sword. It could go either way. And we've seen both sides of that coin in our deep dive today.
Exactly. The decisions we make right now, the conversations we're having, the more aware we are of these issues. It all plays a role in shaping the future.
So what can our listeners do? How can they join this conversation and make their voices heard?
Stay informed, stay engaged, and never be afraid to ask the hard questions. Hold your elected officials accountable, support independent journalism, and have those important conversations about what role we want technology to play in our lives.
We can't just sit on the sidelines. We have to be active participants in our democracies.
Right, absolutely. A healthy democracy needs people to participate. It needs informed citizens who are willing to speak up and demand better.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We started with these individual stories of hardship and intrigue, and we ended up having a much bigger conversation about the future of democracy in this digital age.
And that's the beauty of these deep dives, isn't it? You connect the dots, uncover the bigger picture, and hopefully leave feeling inspired to make a difference.
I couldn't have said it better myself. A huge thank you to you for guiding us through these complex issues. Your insights have been incredibly valuable.
The pleasure was all mine, as always.
And to all our listeners out there, keep asking those tough questions, keep exploring these important issues, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.